Part 6. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Len. Chapter 51. Du Yulin's old face turned red, and he quickly put down the coffin. Your Majesty, you are joking, he smiled. It was indeed not very elegant for him to come to court in this state, but there was no way. He did it for the purpose of persuading others. But he did not expect to see such a scene. From the roar of King Xiaoao, to the change of the attitude of the emperor, and finally King Xiaoao was dragged away like a dead dog. The various reversals in the middle made him dizzy. So much so that he was still a little confused now. Your Majesty has really changed, becoming more mysterious, and his methods are also very tough. Facing the Saint Wang Lizu, he can still be neither humble nor arrogant and turn the situation around. Your Majesty, seems not as stupid as before. This is a good start. In addition, the emperor will live again within 100 years, and make further progress, then Dakin is likely to return to its peak again. Du Yulin became more and more excited as he thought about it, and tears filled his eyes again. He carried the coffin to court today, not to restore Dakin to its former glory. Now that the dawn of hope has appeared before his eyes, how can he not be excited? The other ministers felt the same way. Although Dakin has two major enemies, the Kanyu dynasty and the Qianyuan dynasty, and the rebellion in the north, it is already in a situation of crisis and surrounded by enemies. But as long as Dakin is united and His Majesty is no longer incompetent, then Dakin still has hope. At this moment, all the ministers rekindled their confidence. The appearance of Qin Tian and the longevity medicine undoubtedly gave them a shot of confidence. They believe that as long as His Majesty no longer makes those incompetent moves, they have the confidence to assist His Majesty in restoring the glory of Dakin. Your Majesty, the most urgent task is to suppress the rebellion in the north first, so that Zhang Luoshan will not take advantage of the chaos to stir up trouble and disrupt Dakin. A minister stood up and reported. As soon as this was said, all the ministers followed suit. I second the motion, especially to prevent the north from uniting with the Kanyu dynasty. If they join forces, Dakin will probably fall into a more difficult predicament. I second the motion. The rebellion in the north is a serious matter, and it must not be taken lightly. Your Majesty, please issue an order immediately to quell the rebellion, suppress the north, capture Zhang Luoshan, appease all forces, and stabilize the military. I second the motion. I second the motion. The rest of the ministers stood up one after another. The rebellion of Zhang Luoshan in the north involves a wide range of people, and a little carelessness may lead to a disaster. If there is no proper response, Dakin may fall into chaos. The ministers at this time have no other thoughts. They just want to assist His Majesty and get Dakin out of trouble. After all, the princes are almost dead, and coupled with the attitude of Qin Tian Patriarch towards Qin Mu, they can only be loyal to Qin Mu now. In addition, after Qin Mu's several rounds of slaughter, there were fewer voices opposing and accusing him. Even if there were, they were few and far between. The remaining ministers had selectively forgotten the foolish things Qin Mu had done before. And since the incident had already happened, it was meaningless to care about it. It was better to think about how to get Dakin out of trouble at the lowest cost. As for the miserable and tragic death of the king of Zhenbei, he was only the father of the traitors at this time, and he had only a hostile relationship with them. This is the position. You, Zhang Luoshan, can use the slogan of the Army of Justice, and we can also label you as a traitor and rebel. As for the final result, it depends on who has the bigger fist. History books are always written by the victors. The ministers expressed their opinions one after another, looking at Qin Mu with a rather excited look. At this time, Dakin was both a crisis and an opportunity for them. So many ministers died in the court, so they had hope for the vacant positions. As long as they could make achievements, wouldn't it be natural for them to be promoted? However, while the ministers were excited, Qin Mu leaned lazily on the dragon chair and said lightly, Zhang Luoshan is just a mere figure. You don't have to care so much. I have something more urgent than this. The ministers were stunned when they heard this. Is there anything more urgent than the rebellion in the north? Your Majesty, are you worried about the alliance between the Kanyu dynasty and the Qianyuan dynasty? A minister stood up and asked cautiously. Qin Mu shook his head and sighed slightly. It's more serious than this. Hearing this, all the ministers' hearts were instantly lifted. More serious than this? Is there a stronger enemy that the great Qin needs to face? They stared at Qin Mu nervously. Qin Mu sighed again. My harem has been a little empty recently, and I urgently need a group of concubines to fill the harem. As soon as these words came out, the whole hall was silent. Qin Mu paused, and added, besides, I am a little tired of facing the wives of the criminals in the Yeting Palace every day. It would be best if there were some exotic beauties. Ministers. Du Yulin. They found out that they were wrong, and they were very wrong. This is clearly the same foolish Majesty, who has not changed at all. No. No, there is still a change. That is, the Majesty no longer likes married women, but likes beautiful girls. Your Majesty, what are you talking about? You said you want to add concubines. The ministers looked at Qin Mu blankly, somewhat bewildered. Qin Mu looked at their strange appearance and raised his eyebrows. What, is there a problem? No, no, no. The ministers shook their heads hurriedly. Qin Mu glanced at them. If that's the case, then go and prepare. I'll give you 3 days to go to various places to recruit suitable candidates. 3 days later, I want to see them enter the palace. After saying that, Qin Mu left with a flick of his sleeves. The civil and military officials in the court looked at each other in bewilderment, speechless. Night fell, the stars twinkled, the bright moonlight fell on the earth, and a layer of silver gauze covered the dark night sky. Kanyu dynasty, inside the palace. In the imperial garden. A woman in red sat quietly by the lake, looking up at the bright full moon in the night sky, her eyes calm, without any ripples. Your Majesty, what are you thinking about? At this time, a pleasant voice sounded behind Xuanhuan, and a girl in a blue skirt came slowly. This girl in a blue skirt was very delicate, with skin whiter than snow, delicate makeup, a brocade robe that shone brightly, and long hair dancing in the evening breeze. She came to Xuanhuan's side lightly, her eyes full of concern. This girl in a blue skirt was the Kanyu princess who escaped from the Qin dynasty, Xuanhuan. At this time, she was graceful and elegant, and she was completely different from the embarrassed appearance in the Yeting Palace. But no one knew that there was an extremely strange and weird butterfly pattern engraved on Xuanhuan's lower abdomen. It was totally incompatible with her holy temperament at this moment, as if a spirit from the abyss was dragging her into darkness together. Xuanhuan. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 52. After hearing Xuanhuan's words, Xuanhuan did not reply, but still stared at the full moon in the night sky, motionless. Seeing this, Xuanhuan showed concern and continued, Your Majesty. Before the words were spoken, Xuanhuan said lightly, Did you bring wine? Xuanhuan nodded repeatedly, Take it. Xuanhuan turned around gently and smiled, Then have a drink with me. Xuanhuan walked to the opposite side of Xuanhuan, sat down ying, took out the wine glass, and filled 2 glasses of wine. Xuanhuan took the wine glass. The 2 raised glasses to drink, the aroma of wine overflowed, and the moonlight was like water. The lake surface ripples slightly under the moonlight, and the mist is filled with mist, making it look like a fairyland. After Xuanhuan finished the drink, she looked at the wine glass and suddenly said, Do you know why I like the moon? Xiaqiangxiu was slightly startled and shook her head. Because no matter how dark it is, as long as you look up, you can see the light of the moon. After Xia Hong'ai finished drinking the wine glass, she looked up at the moon again. It illuminates me, and it also illuminates the moon. Xia Hong'ai's voice was very soft, as if she was afraid of breaking the tranquility of the night. Sometimes I wonder whether the land I rule under this bright moon can really bring peace and happiness to the people of Kangyu. Xiaqiangxiu smiled and said softly, Your Majesty, in my opinion, you are the beacon of Kangyu, and your existence is the strength of Kangyu's people. Xia Hong'ai smiled slightly and suddenly changed the subject. It was my mistake to send you to the Qin dynasty, and you suffered. Xiaqiangxiu shook her head, Your Majesty, this matter has nothing to do with you. Who would have thought that Qin Mu would be so stupid and act without any regard for the consequences? Xia Hong'ai pondered slightly and said softly. I feel that Qin Mu is not as simple as he seems on the surface. Everything he has done recently is unbelievable to me. This is no longer called mediocre, this is called stupidity. I don't believe that a person can be so stupid, unless he wants something else, or... Speaking of this, a cold light flashed in Ji Hong'ai's eyes, and she said coldly, What is he hiding? Xiaqiangxiu looked at Xia Hong'ai and her heart trembled slightly. Your Majesty, what do you think Qin Mu is hiding? Xiaqiangxiu asked cautiously. Xia Hong'ai shook his head and kept silent. Xiaqiangxiu pursed her red lips slightly and asked again, Now that Zhang Luoshan in the north has begun to gather an army and points his sword at Chang'an, should we also help her? Ji Hong'ai suddenly smiled, with a trace of amusement flashing in his eyes, No, let Zhang Luoshan test it out first. I want to see what Qin Mu is hiding. But the court. Xiaqiangxiu hesitated. The ministers in the court are very dissatisfied with Deqin, especially the generals, who have threatened to send troops to conquer Deqin. Xia Hong'ai said calmly, Don't worry, I will discuss this matter with them at court tomorrow morning. Xiaqiangxiu nodded, and then said, Your Majesty, as well as the envoys of the Xuanhuan dynasty, we have been ignoring them for a long time, and their dissatisfaction is also very strong now. Hearing this, Xiaqiangxiu snorted lightly, with a sneer on her pink lips. The weaklings of the Xuanhuan dynasty want to send troops to conquer the Qin dynasty, but they don't want to send troops to contribute. They also want us Kangyu to take the lead. They have a good idea. Continue to let them hang out and wait until they offer more generous conditions. Xiaqiangxiu nodded respectfully, Yes. Xia Hong'ai stretched, then swung the wine glass and asked, Is there any more? Have another glass. Xiaqiangxiu quickly filled the wine glass again, and after Xia Hong'ai drank it all in one gulp, she said, Your Majesty, it's late at night, go back to the palace and rest. There are many things waiting for you to deal with tomorrow. Hiccup. Xia Hong'ai burped from wine, a trace of blush appeared on her snowy face, she waved her hand, You go back first, I want to stay here for a while. Okay. Xiaqiangxiu stood up and bowed slightly respectfully, Your Majesty, I will go down first. Under the moonlight, Xiaqiangxiu's figure gradually disappeared into the imperial garden, leaving only a faint fragrance. Xia Hong'ai glanced lightly and frowned slightly. She always felt that something was wrong with Xiaqiangxiu since she escaped from Deqin, but she couldn't pinpoint what exactly was wrong. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Xia Hong'ai sighed and muttered to himself. It is difficult to be an emperor, it is even more difficult to be a wise king, and it is even harder to be a wise empress. In the eyes of outsiders, Empress Kangyu is decisive and ruthless in killing, and manages the country in an orderly manner with iron-blooded policies and gentle methods, which is awe-inspiring. But who knows her hard work and hardship? She thinks more than ordinary people, because behind her is a whole country. She must carefully consider every step and try to be as foolproof as possible to prevent the Kangyu dynasty from making unnecessary sacrifices. Her ambitions are so great that she hopes that the Kangyu dynasty will become the sole overlord of the Tianlan territory, but at the same time her ambitions are also very small, so small that she only hopes that every Kangyu people will not be bullied. Great Qin, Northern Territory, Xuanhuan. A cold light flashed in Xuanhuan's eyes, the fun has just begun. At the same time, the Qin dynasty. In the Yeting Palace, Qin Mu was also enjoying the show. Keep playing music, keep dancing. You should twist your buttocks, what's the point of being so shy? And you, why are you wearing so much? Huh. Qin Mu rested his head on Yunyan's snow-white jade legs, holding the purple jade grapes handed by Ching Ching in his mouth, pressing Han Sueki who was kneeling on the ground on his legs, enjoying Hongluan's soft and boneless little hands kneading his shoulders, playing with Ziun Snow Mountain in his hands, and scolding the panicked palace maids in front of him. These palace maids had obviously just entered the Yeting Palace. They seemed to be in a hurry under Qin Mu's scolding, and there were still traces of tears on their faces, showing a weak posture that was pitiful. Several younger women were still crying, their eyes were grey, and their beautiful eyes were full of panic. They were the women of the family of the demoted Minister of War. At this time, the Minister of War did not know what happened in Chang'an City. He was still on his way to lead his army to attack Chang'an, dreaming of Qin Wuji's rebellion being successful and him completing his mission of following the dragon. Little did he know. The murderous intention had quietly arrived. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Leng Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 53. Under night, in a valley. A large number of soldiers wearing armor camped here. The tent in the center is the residence of Xuanhuan, the Minister of War. At this moment, inside the camp. Shang Shuzhao, do you think the prince has succeeded now? A military general asked in a low voice with longing on his face. Zhao Huiran smiled slightly and was full of confidence. The backer behind the prince is Patriarch Qin Tian, how could it fail? We are not going to participate in the battle this time, but to complete the finishing work. After the words fell, all the generals in the camp were completely relieved. The first reason why they agreed to rebel with King Xiaoao was that they were too disappointed with His Majesty today. The second reason is the backer behind King Xiaoao. That is the ancestor of Qin Tian, His Majesty's wife, the Supreme Emperor. With him as his backer, it's impossible for Xiaoao King to fail. Don't worry. After King Xiaoao ascends the throne of God, you all will have the power to follow the dragon, and your rise to greatness will be just around the corner. The Minister of War said confidently. At this time, a soldier took out a wine glass, filled it with strong liquor, raised the glass and said boldly. Come, colleagues, let's drink to the fact that we are about to overthrow the rule of the fatuous king and restore a clear sky to the Qin dynasty. Others also raised their glasses, with excited smiles on their faces. These words can be said to have spoken to their hearts. They are not a rebellion, let alone rebels, but a righteous force to overthrow the rule of the ignorant king. This is important. Only in this way will they be able to step onto the court stage again as meritorious ministers in the future, and be promoted to higher ranks. Zhao Huiran also raised his glass and laughed, here, cheers. All the soldiers raised their necks and drank all the wine in one gulp. Then there was laughter and conversation, everyone exchanged cups and drank wine, and the camp was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. However, what they don't know is that at this time, the outside of the camp was suddenly shrouded in a deep and extreme darkness, as if there were countless pairs of invisible eyes staring closely at this lively camp. The chilling wind blew through, making a blood-curdling hissing sound. At this time, the curtain of the tent was suddenly blown by a gust of cold wind. Everyone couldn't help but shudder, their alcoholism dissipated instantly, they felt chills running down their spines, and a strange atmosphere enveloped the entire camp. "What's going on? I actually feel a hint of coldness," a general murmured to himself, his tone full of surprise and uncertainty. With his spiritual sea-level cultivation, he was no longer afraid of cold and heat, but under this cold wind, he actually felt like shivering. Everyone else was also worried about something bad, and they looked around cautiously, mobilizing their spiritual power and preparing to fight at any time. Xuanhuan, who had the highest level of cultivation, frowned, feeling that this aura was a little familiar. At this moment, a dark chain suddenly shuttled through the void and easily locked the neck of a general. There was a crisp sound, and the general's head immediately dropped. His eyes widened, he fell to the ground with disbelief on his face, and his life disappeared. "No! There's an enemy attack," a general shouted in horror. At the same time, two more dark chains flashed out of thin air. With a pop, it pierced the throats and chests of several other generals and took away their lives. In just the blink of an eye, 4 or 5 generals died tragically after taking the lead, and their bodies fell straight to the ground. "What? Who is that person?" The remaining 5 or 6 generals were so frightened that they drew their swords and faced each other. The temperature in the camp dropped sharply, and the shadow of death spread rapidly like a plague, sweeping through everyone in the camp, making everyone feel as cold as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. "It's the Dark God Guard." Zhao Huiran's eyes were splitting, and he finally understood where the familiarity came from. These chains are clearly the chains used by the Dark God Guards. Zhao Huiran slapped the table with his palm, shouted loudly, and wanted to rush out of the camp. At this moment, a long knife suddenly appeared and slashed hard. The blade of the sword bloomed with bright light, like the rising sun, and it was extremely terrifying. Zhao Huiran's heart was beating wildly, and the hair on his body was standing on end. He quickly used his spiritual power to resist, summoning a piece of defensive armor to protect his body. Chiang! The sound of gold and iron clashing shook the heaven and earth, and sparks shot out. The warriors in the camp couldn't help but close their eyes, and their eardrums buzzed. "Ah!" Along with a shrill scream, Zhao Huiran flew backwards, vomiting blood, as if struck by lightning. The solid tent was collapsed and shattered. Zhao Huiran was hit hard on the ground, his body covered in blood and his breath was weak. Zhao Shangshu. Seeing this scene, the remaining generals were frightened. They never expected that someone as powerful as the Minister of War could not even catch a move from the Dark God Guard. He. At this time, an indifferent voice came, "You trash, how dare you rebel?" Many warriors looked up and saw a tall and thin figure walking slowly from the door of the camp. He was wearing a grimace mask, with a sarcastic curve at the corner of his mouth, shaking his head and looking at them mockingly. "It's you." After seeing the person clearly, Zhao Huiran's pupils shrank sharply, his face full of horror. He never expected that the visitor would be the leader of the Dark God Guard, Ghostface. Ghostface? How dare Qin Mu, that stupid king, let you leave Chang'an City? Isn't he afraid of someone assassinating him? Zhao Huiran looked at the other party with fear on his face and said with a trembling voice. This time should be the time when Chang'an City is at its most chaotic. How dare Hunjun let the leader of the Dark God Guard come out to rob and kill them instead of protecting his own safety? Aren't you afraid of death? Or, the situation in Chang'an City has changed. When Zhao Huiran thought of this, his face turned extremely pale, and his heart fell into a deep valley. The ghost face is none other than Li Han, and the Dark God Guard never shows his true appearance outside. He is like a ghost hiding in the dark, which makes people frightened. He looked at Zhao Huiran indifferently, with strong murderous intent in his eyes. "You are a bold rebel and dare to call His Majesty by his name. You should be killed." I saw Li Han's figure flickering, turning into a black stream of light and rushing away. You! Zhao Huiran's eyes widened and he was about to roar. But before he could finish speaking, Li Han's offensive arrived. The pitch-black chains penetrated the air one after another, making a shrill sound, as cunning and vicious as a poisonous snake. Zhao Huiran's expression changed drastically, and he frantically mobilized the spiritual power in his body to gather in front of him, trying to stop all this. Boom! The next moment, the chain crashed onto Zhao Huiran's spiritual barrier, making a huge collision sound. Immediately afterwards, the spiritual barrier collapsed like glass, and then penetrated straight through Zhao Huiran's body. Zhao Huiran screamed. He lowered his head and saw a dark chain inserted between his chest and abdomen, with red blood gurgling out. Li Han's hand stretched out his hand again, and another dark chain swept out like a dragon, wrapped around Zhao Huiran's neck, and lifted him in the air. His eyes were cold, the corners of his mouth were slightly hooked, and he said in a hoarse voice. The rebel Zhao Huiran, Your Majesty has ordered that all the men in the Zhao family be killed and all the women be sent to Yeting. Congratulations, you are the last to be tried. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Bulletin Leng. Chapter 54. Listening to Li Han's voice, Zhao Huiran's whole body stiffened and his face turned pale. He asked tremblingly. King Xiaoao, where is the prince? Li Han sneered, the traitor Qin Wuji has been beheaded long ago. Your Majesty's power is beyond the reach of traitors like you. After saying that, he suddenly tightened the chain and heard a crisp click. Zhao Huiran stared with endless regret and unwillingness, his arms hung down weakly, blood continued to gush out, and the breath of life disappeared rapidly. Seeing this scene, everyone fell into a daze, staring at Zhao Huiran's pale and bloodless face, speechless for a long time. After a brief silence, many generals knelt on the ground and begged loudly for their lives. At this time, they felt nothing but regret. But it's obviously too late now. Li Han's snorted coldly, pointed his sword, and slashed at everyone in the air. Aha! A black sword that was several feet long burst out and killed dozens of generals in an instant. Blood spilled all over the ground, staining the entire camp red. Li Han's looked around and said calmly, everyone, since you choose to be rebellious, you must be prepared to have your entire clan killed. His tone was calm, but it sounded cold and murderous. Kill, shoot them all without mercy. Li Han's order was issued. Then, hundreds of masked men in black clothes were seen slowly coming out from every corner of the camp. Like an evil ghost crawling up from the nine nether hell, holding a dark chain, like a scythe of death, slaughtering the surviving generals in other camps. Miserable howls could be heard endlessly, with broken limbs and corpses strewn across the fields. Blood soaked the earth, and the pungent smell of blood was so strong that it could not be dissolved, and it almost condensed into substance. At the same time, how many times have you and I told you to twist up? Do you understand? In the Yeting Palace, Han Sueki frowned slightly and kept scolding several girls in the center of the hall. She was already very beautiful and graceful, but the way she put on a pretty face to admonish others made her even more delicate and charming, making people's hearts flutter. However, the girls standing in front of Han Sueki at this time showed no appreciation at all. Their faces were pale, their whole bodies were trembling, and their eyes looking at Han Sueki were full of fear and fear. At this time, they were all silent and whispered, "We will remember." Seeing this scene, Han Sueki sighed softly and shook her head helplessly. Your Majesty will test your dancing results later. If your dancing is still so bad, you and I will both be punished, do you understand? Han Sueki said, worry flashed in her beautiful eyes. She had finally suffered less torture these days, but she didn't want to be punished again. I know. Several girls nodded weakly. Han Sueki said helplessly, let's continue practicing. Then several girls jumped up again. Han Sueki was sitting on the chair next to her, holding her cheeks and staring at them with her beautiful eyes without blinking. These girls are similar in age, all 17 or 18 years old, with good looks and graceful figures. The only shortcoming is that they obviously still haven't understood the true meaning of dance, and their dancing is very stiff and has no sense of beauty at all. Han Sueki felt even more desperate inside. It seems that the punishment will be inevitable. At this moment, in another hall of Yeting Palace, Qin Mu turned sideways and lay lazily on the soft couch. In front of him, kneeling down, was a beautiful woman with a graceful figure and charming charm. She was wearing a black and white professional work uniform, and her plump and slender thighs were wrapped in a pair of extremely transparent and shiny black stockings. No shoes on. The 5 pink and slender jade toes are slightly curled up, and through the thin black silk, you can see the wonderful outline between the jade toes. It is Xuanhuan's wife, Empress Wang. Your Majesty, Xiaoxiu and the others are still young and ignorant, so they will inevitably bump into your Majesty. The sinful woman begs your Majesty not to blame them. The beautiful woman raised her delicate and charming oval face, her beautiful eyes were watery, and she looked pitiful and pitiful, which was extremely pitiful. An evil smile appeared on Qin Mu's lips, and he slowly picked up the jade cup filled with wine on the table and took a sip. Then he put down the wine glass, looked at the beautiful woman who was as supple as a cat in front of him, and said softly, "You really care about your child." Wang lay prone on the ground with her forehead close to the ground. Zhao Huiran rebelled, and his 9 tribes should be punished, but His Majesty is kind-hearted and forgives us, the daughters of the guilty ministers. So the lives of the slave family were saved by your Majesty. The slave family has nothing to ask for. I just hope that your Majesty will not anger Xiao Shui and the others because of this matter. Wang bit her lip, her voice soft and charming, making people's bones numb. King Xiaoao has fallen, and Zhao Huiran does not know whether he is alive or dead. The only person she can rely on now is herself. Mrs. Wang now only hopes that His Majesty is really as dissolute as the rumors, so that she can have some value. Otherwise. Wang sighed inwardly. Qin Mu smiled faintly, reached out and pinched Wang's chin, and said jokingly, "I am indeed kind-hearted, but that does not mean I will be magnanimous. Especially for those who betray my master, I will never show mercy." Wang's face turned pale, her beautiful eyes were filled with tears, and she said in panic, "Your Majesty, I know my mistake. I promise that I will try my best to serve your Majesty from now on." Qin Mu let go of his hand, his face calm, "Then it depends on how you perform in the future." Hearing this, Wang's face suddenly showed a look of surprise, and she kowtowed to thank him in a gentle voice. "Thank you, your Majesty, I will definitely not let your Majesty down." After saying that, she stood up gracefully, letting Qin Mu see what it means to be old and cunning. Qin Mu couldn't help but sigh. She has to be a wife. The next day, the news of the rebellion of King Xiaoao and the Minister of War once again set off the entire Chang'an city. At the same time, the news that Qin Mu was going to recruit exotic beautiful girls to the palace as concubines was also spread. This made the public opinion, which was already undercurrent, roar again. "Have you heard that King Xiaoao actually colluded with the Minister of War and attempted to rebel, but failed in the end? Alas, this King Xiaoao is also a great man, but I didn't expect that he would end up like this." Who said it wasn't? In just a few days, 2 princes of our great Qin have died. If this continues, I'm afraid that before the Kangyu Empire attacks, our great Qin will be finished. Hey! Our Majesty doesn't think so. He is still recruiting concubines into the palace. Shh, keep your voice down, my family lives near the residence of the Minister of War. You didn't see that the blood has flowed outside? There were discussions everywhere in Chang'an City. Everywhere was discussing what happened yesterday. Some people sighed, and some were indignant. And Qin Mu, who did all this, was leisurely eating grapes and enjoying rice in the palace. Ding! It was detected that the host was still recruiting concubines into the palace when the great Qin was in turmoil. It can be said that he was too licentious and got the stupid reward, Hehuazai Fa. The method of transformation, it is a supreme secret technique, the best in the world, the pinnacle of the immortal way, which can transform everything, can transform freedom, can transform everything into time, and can transform all the powerful people from ancient times to the present. After practicing to the highest level, it can make the world overturn, the sky sink, the universe reverse, immortal and indestructible, and all things return to one. Qin Mu was shocked. He didn't even bother to eat the rice bowl, and immediately began to comprehend. 3 days later, in the court, the ministers walked into the hall one after another, their faces full of fatigue. In the past 3 days, they can be said to be non-stop, without any rest, going to various places in Deccan to find beautiful girls with exotic styles. During this period, they encountered many dangers, but fortunately, they finally completed the task. After a while, Qin Mu's figure appeared in the hall. The ministers were about to kneel down, but they were suddenly shocked. His Majesty's breath. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Leng Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 55. His Majesty's aura seemed to be much stronger, and his every move gave people a sense of great majesty. It is as if he is an emperor who rules over all the worlds, which makes people tremble with fear. At this moment, a strong sense of awe rose in their hearts. But the next moment, they no longer felt such momentum, as if it was just an illusion of theirs. "See your Majesty." The ministers knelt on the ground and spoke respectfully from the bottom of their hearts. Qin Mu walked up to the dragon chair slowly, looked down at the ministers in the court from a high position, glanced around lightly, and said, 3 days have passed, have you completed your mission? For the past 3 days, Qin Mu has eaten delicious rice bowls every day. It's already a bit boring and I want to change my taste. Although the food is good, I can't stand eating it all the time. He now needs some exotic food to soothe his taste. Your Majesty, I am fortunate enough to have fulfilled my duty and collected a total of 5,000 exotic beauties to perform in Beijing. Wang Xing, the secretary of the Ministry of Finance, who had a fat face and big ears, was the first to hold up his hands and said respectfully. He had a high position and great wealth. He had a total of 5,000 people at once, which shocked the other ministers in the hall. Do you want it to be so rolled? To find 5,000 people in just 3 days is simply outrageous. You know, each of them only found 1 or 2 at most. This is already the limit. After all, there are not many exotic beauties who can meet His Majesty's requirements, and the Qin dynasty is in chaos now, with roaring voices everywhere. They didn't dare to make a big show at all, for fear of being robbed and killed by hostile forces such as Zhang Luoshan or Kangyu dynasty. And some ministers didn't even leave their homes, preparing to sacrifice the female members of their families directly. Wang Xing stood in the court with a proud look. For this mission, he used almost all his connections and power, and spent countless spiritual stones and treasures, just to complete the task perfectly. But now, he can already predict His Majesty's joy. As expected, Qin Mu nodded with satisfaction and praised. Wang Yiqing is indeed the pillar of our country, the Qin dynasty. She is loyal and devoted to our country, and she deserves to be rewarded. It is not unreasonable for Wang Xing to be able to sit in the position of Minister of the Ministry of Revenue. His ability to follow people's influence is far better than other ministers. 5,000 people, even if they favor 10 people a day, it will take a year to do it all. What a good job, you should be rewarded. Qin Mu was in a good mood. With these 5,000 concubines, his immortal level dual cultivation skills can be put to great use. Wang Xing was extremely excited when he heard this and said quickly, "It is my duty to serve His Majesty. I dare not take credit for it. Your Majesty has worked hard day and night for the Qin dynasty. This is what we should learn from." Qin Mu sighed and nodded in agreement. "You're right. I have indeed worked hard day and night. My waist has been a little bad lately. It's been too hard." Wang Xing's eyes turned sharply and he immediately replied, "Your Majesty, don't worry. I have also found a lot of nourishing treasures for your Majesty, and are preparing to present them to your Majesty. Your Majesty must take care of your dragon body. Just leave these trivial matters to me." Qin Mu smiled slightly. Wang Iking is too polite. Since it is Wang Iking's intention, I will accept it. When Wang Xing heard this, his heart ached. Qin Mu hasn't said anything about rewarding him yet, but he ended up getting so many things first. Of course, he only dared to curse in his heart, but he never dared to show it on his face. On the contrary, he had to show excitement and surprise. "It is an honor for me to be able to relieve His Majesty's worries." When other courtiers saw the conversation between Qin Mu and Wang Xing, their hearts became even more complicated. Now they finally know why they can't become the Minister of Household Affairs. Look at this performance. It's a textbook answer. There is really a lot they need to learn. Many ministers secretly wrote it down in their notebooks. At this time. Then Qin Mu asked calmly, "How is your mission accomplished?" The other ministers exchanged looks with each other, all feeling a little embarrassed. With Wang Xing's 5,000 in front, it's really hard for the two of them to take action. In the end, it was National Master Du Yulin who spoke. "Your Majesty, I hope you will live up to your orders. We have collected all the exotic and beautiful girls from various cities in the Qin dynasty. After many layers of selection and testing, we have selected hundreds of women with the best looks and the most beautiful dancing skills. Please take a look at your Majesty." After hearing the words of the Imperial Master, all the ministers breathed a sigh of relief, secretly saying that the Imperial Master could still speak. It's not that they were looking for a small number of people, but they went through a selection process and picked out the most beautiful ones. "Yes, that's it." Qin Mu's eyes lit up slightly. "Thank you for your hard work, Imperial Master. Bring him here quickly so I can take a look." According to the order. All the ministers saluted together. A moment later, a group of young and beautiful girls were sent into the court hall and appeared in front of Qin Mu. "Your Majesty, this woman was found by Wei Chen in Liaosha City in southern Xinjiang. Her name is Mu Yiyi. She is naturally beautiful and extremely enchanting. She is the best dancer in southern Xinjiang." Mu Yiyi. A minister pointed to a girl with a curvy figure, creamy skin, delicate eyebrows and eyes, and a delicate and pretty figure. The girl was not very old, about 18 or 19 years old, wearing a gauze with white and crystal skin, and a graceful figure, like a fairy exiled to the earth. "Very good, not bad." Qin Mu glanced at her and immediately ordered, "Let's dance first." "Yes." The girl responded, and then walked into the hall with lotus steps, and then danced gracefully. The girl had a slender waist, straight and slender legs, and she moved slowly and lightly, dancing like a fairy in the hall. Especially her appearance was stunning, with fair and rosy skin and sparkling eyes. Every frown and smile was a temptation, making people unable to help but sink into it. Moreover, when she danced, she exuded a strange fragrance that was refreshing and intoxicating. "Good, you danced well, you are worthy of being the best dancer in southern Xinjiang." Qin Mu showed a satisfied expression. "Thank you, Your Majesty, for your compliment." Hearing Qin Mu's praise, the girl smiled shyly. The minister who introduced her also showed joy and flattered him. Your Majesty has a keen eye and can see at a glance that this girl has extraordinary talent and is rare in the world. Your Majesty really has a keen eye for pearls. In the following time, one minister after another came forward to report to Qin Mu and sent up the exotic beauties they had collected. Your Majesty, her name is Xuanhuan. She has a trace of demon blood in her body. Although it is not pure blood, her bloodline is quite pure. It is a rare phoenix bloodline. Xuanhuan. Your Majesty, this woman is a mermaid from the blue sea. This one is called. With the introduction of one minister after another, beautiful exotic beauties appeared in the court for Qin Mu to check. These exotic beauties, each with a slender figure, exquisite appearance, wearing all kinds of clothes, and charming postures are extremely seductive. For a time, the court was filled with singing and dancing, and full of decadent music. Each one is stunningly beautiful and a disaster to the country and the people. Even Wang Xing, the Minister of Revenue, had to admit that although these women could not match him in quantity, they were slightly better than him in quality. Well, not bad. Qin Mu was naturally very satisfied. These guys are pretty awesome. There are actually nearly 100 exotic beauties, and 16 top-level exotic beauties with excellent looks and extraordinary talents. Qin Mu looked at these women and felt a little emotional. If there is a system of having many children and many blessings at this time, it will be even more perfect. And at this moment, a girl with a special temperament suddenly caught Qin Mu's attention. Jiqianxiu's magic seal status. Today is a big update, and there will be 3 to 4 chapters in the evening. The data is too bad, and there is no rating yet. I beg all the big guys to give some free gifts to support me. If you have time, you can help the author to promote the book shortage. Love you. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Leng Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 56. This is a girl who looks very aloof. She was wearing a long aqua dress, her skin was like snow, her face was delicate and cold, as if it were carved from mutton fat white jade, and she was incomparably beautiful. Moreover, her stature is slightly shorter than other women, so she is inconspicuous among all the beauties. Therefore, Qin Mu did not notice her immediately. And this is what makes her special. The other girls tried their best to show off their figures, looking directly at Qin Mu with their charming eyes. I hope to gain favor and fly to the branches to become a phoenix. But this girl kept her head lowered and remained silent, as if she didn't notice Qin Mu. Qin Mu immediately became very interested in her. National Master, who is this woman? Qin Mu looked at the National Master Du Yulan and asked. Your Majesty, this girl was indeed met by chance when Wei Chen was looking for her in Liang County. Du Qiaoshi replied respectfully. Oh? What's her name? Qin Mu asked curiously. This. Du Qiaoshi hesitated for a moment and said, Your Majesty, the woman's name is Lu Ningxuang. She has a cold constitution, so her personality may be a little cold. I hope your Majesty will not blame her. Qin Mu smiled softly and asked, then she also entered the palace voluntarily. Du Yulan nodded and said with some shame, Your Majesty, of course it is voluntary. I will not force others to do anything. This incident sounds quite coincidental. Ever since Qin Mu's order was issued, Du Yulan has been in some difficulties. After all, everyone in the Qin dynasty knew that Du Qiaoshi was a clean and self-sufficient person, and he would never do anything to force a good girl into prostitution or use coercion or inducement. Moreover, he did not want His Majesty to indulge in beauty and waste the court. So at the beginning, Du Yulin had no intention of fulfilling His Majesty's order to recruit a concubine. He went on a trip to Liang County just to show off. But who would have thought that he would meet a young girl? The other party recognized his identity at a glance and begged him to take him into the palace to serve His Majesty. This girl spoke sincerely, and he couldn't bear to refuse. So he completed his task and brought the girl into the palace. Du Yulin recalled all this and felt a little puzzled. This Lu Ningxuang was begging hard and looked like she wanted to enter the palace. Why are you so indifferent when you are in front of His Majesty? What kind of game is this? Could it be that this is playing hard to get? Du Yulin thought secretly in his heart. Raise your head and let me see. At this time, Qin Mu waved his hand and gave instructions lightly. The girl named Lu Ningxuang slowly raised her head and met Qin Mu's eyes. She was wearing a light purple dress, spotless. Her black hair was pulled into a simple bun, fixed with an emerald green hairpin. The waist is slender, like a willow tree, with attractive curves. The beautiful face is slightly sickly pale, the eyebrows are slightly frowned, the lips are pressed tightly, the facial features are exquisite, and the temperament is as cold as orchid. What attracted Qin Mu most to her was her watery eyes, which were as bright and penetrating as if they contained a bright moon. Lu Ningxuang. Especially at this moment, she was quiet and neither arrogant nor impetuous, which made people feel a sense of pity. Qin Mu's eyes brightened slightly and he stared at her with interest, a smile on his lips. I am used to seeing allure and glamour, but occasionally I take a look at this little fresh feeling, which is really unique. Your name is Lu Ningxuang? Qin Mu asked. Your Majesty, the civilian girl's name is Lu Ningxuang. Please see Your Majesty. The girl saluted Yingying, her voice was clear and graceful. Lu Ningxuang, do you want to enter the palace? Qin Mu asked straight to the point. Yes, the girl wants to serve His Majesty, please allow His Majesty's permission. The girl looked firm and did not flinch. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and asked, can you dance? No, Lu Ningxuang said two words calmly. As soon as these words came out, everyone around was shocked. How dare you say the word will not so confidently in front of His Majesty? Isn't this too courageous? Aren't you afraid of His Majesty Longyan's anger? Even the national master Du Yulin couldn't help but twitched his eyelids and was frightened. He secretly thought something was wrong and hurriedly persuaded. Miss Ningxuang, this is above the court, no nonsense. I'm not talking nonsense, I really can't dance, Lu Ningxuang responded calmly. National Preceptor Du Yulin was immediately speechless. Sincerity is always a must-win. Listening to the girl's sincere words, he didn't know how to refute her for a moment. At this time, the dance in the hall ended, and all the girls prostrate themselves and knelt on the ground. Only Lu Ningxuang was still standing in the center of the hall. His figure is graceful, and he looks out of place compared to the others, but he also feels a bit aloof. Qin Mu became more interested in her. So special. It's too cold. No matter if she was faking it or not. There is always a feeling that you want to plunge her into the abyss. Qin Mu felt a strong desire to conquer in his heart. He chuckled and asked lightly, then what do you know? Your Majesty, civilian girls are good at using swords, Lu Ningxuang said calmly. Qin Mu's eyes flashed, and he said, where's your sword? Bring it here for me to see. Lu Ningxuang did not take out her own sword, but looked at Du Yulin. Apparently, all her magic weapons were confiscated before the court session. Du Yulin frowned slightly, looked at Qin Mu, and hesitated, Your Majesty, no weapons are allowed to enter the Golden Palace. No problem, Qin Mu waved his hand, give her the sword. Du Yulin hesitated for a moment, and finally handed a sheathed long sword with a chill to Lu Ningxuang. Lu Ningxuang stretched out her slender fingers like scallions and took the sheathed long sword. She lowered her head and stared at the sword, and a hint of imperceptible coldness flashed in her watery eyes. Lu Ningxuang's hands trembled slightly, so that her voice became a little hoarse. "Thank you, Your Majesty, for the sword." Qin Mu smiled and nodded, motioning her to continue the performance. Lu Ningxuang took a deep breath and turned the jade hand holding the hilt of the sword slightly. "At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid." Author, Leng Mi and Buletin Leng. Chapter 57. Although the sword blade was not unsheathed, the entire sword body instantly flashed with cold light, emitting sharp sword energy. She turned her white wrist, and then swept the sword body. A cold light swept through the air, drawing an arc-shaped trajectory. This sword was extremely clean and neat, like an antelope hanging its horns, and it was unrestrained. Lu Ningxuang's slender hands holding the sword swayed gently, as if dancing, and seemed to be jumping. She moved her feet, sometimes left, sometimes right, sometimes forward, sometimes backward, and the changes were unpredictable. With every step she took, the sword would pierce the air, bursting out a sharp whistling sound. With every step Lu Ningxuang danced, snowflakes appeared faintly where her small jade feet touched. As Lu Ningxuang moved, the snowflakes accumulated thicker and thicker, and soon covered the entire center of the hall. Waves of cold swept across the entire venue, causing the temperature of the hall to drop sharply, as if falling into an ice cellar. Lu Ningxuang's figure became more and more ethereal, like a fairy from the earth. Her movements were graceful and soft, but full of domineering and strong. Each movement did not look gorgeous, but full of power and beauty. Each move was chilling, making people feel cold all over. Every time Lu Ningxuang stepped on the veins of snowflakes, she was light, swift, graceful, and flexible. Her whole body exuded a unique rhythm. She was like a dancing fairy, pleasing to the eye. But under this beautiful scene, there was an extremely sharp sword energy. The two were perfectly integrated to form a shocking picture. The hall suddenly became quiet, and you could hear a pin drop. Everyone held their breath and stared at the dancing girl in the center of the hall. So beautiful. This was the thought that popped up in everyone's mind at the same time. However, Du Yulin frowned, because he seemed to feel a vague murderous intent from it. But when he looked again, he could not catch anything. Du Yulin frowned slightly. At this time, Qin Mu nodded slightly, clapped his hands, and praised, "Good swordsmanship." The ministers immediately followed suit and cheered in unison, "Good swordsmanship! Good swordsmanship!" Lu Ningxuang stopped swinging the sword, moved lightly, came to Qin Mu, and knelt respectfully. Qin Mu stretched out his hand and gently brushed the black hair hanging in front of the girl's forehead, revealing a quiet and pure delicate face. He smiled softly, "Does this swordsmanship have a name?" "Reporting to Your Majesty, it is called Shueji." Lu Ningxuang raised her eyes and said seriously. Qin Mu smiled and nodded, "Very good, reward." Lu Ningxuang thanked the emperor for his grace. Then she raised her head, curled her lips slightly, and whispered, "Your Majesty, I have another sword to present to Your Majesty." Qin Mu raised his eyebrows slightly, and said with interest, "Oh? Then let me see it quickly." Lu Ningxuang pursed her lips and smiled. She slowly stood up, holding a long sword in her hand, and drew the sword out of the sheath for the first time. In an instant, a dazzling cold light bloomed, illuminating everyone's eyes. A crystal-clear ice sword appeared in everyone's sight. Its surface was covered with a thin layer of frost, which refracted the aurora under the light, which was magnificent. Moreover, the cold air it exuded was even more creepy. It was like an ice elf that had been unsealed and was going to wreak havoc on the world. In the hall, at the moment when the sword was unsheathed, snowflakes were flying, adding a bit of bleakness and desolation. Lu Ningxuang walked slowly with the sword in hand and walked to the center of the hall. There was always a faint smile on her lips, and that smile looked so sweet and moving. "Your Majesty, please appreciate this sword carefully." As soon as the voice fell, Lu Ningxuang tapped her jade feet lightly, and her figure moved. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared from the spot, leaving only an illusory after-image. The next second, a crisp sound of breaking through the air sounded in the hall. When Lu Ningxuang appeared again, she had come to Qin Mu's side. She swung the frost longsword in her hand, and a silver light cut through the air. Clang! A sharp whistle sounded, and the tip of the sword fell just less than an inch away from Qin Mu. At this moment, Du Yulin finally realized that something was wrong, and hurriedly roared, "Protect your Majesty." Then his figure disappeared from the spot in an instant, and he went straight to Qin Mu. At this moment, he didn't care about the etiquette between the monarch and the ministers, and he just wanted to block this sword for his Majesty. However, all this happened too quickly, and the tip of the sword was less than an inch away from Qin Mu at this time. No matter how fast he was, he couldn't be faster than Lu Ningxuang, who was holding a sword at this moment. "Go to hell, tyrant!" Lu Ningxuang's pretty face was filled with murderous intent, and her eyes were determined. There was also a hint of relief and excitement. When she thought that she could kill the enemy immediately, Lu Ningxuang felt unprecedented comfort in her heart, as if the heavy burden on her body was finally lifted at this moment. She could even hear the sound of blood surging in her chest, and she even smelled the strong smell of blood from the body of the tyrant. At this moment, she forgot everything, no fear or fear, only the pleasure of revenge. "Father, Mother, Xuanhuan has avenged you." The smile on Lu Ningxuang's mouth became more charming and brilliant. "Your Majesty, be careful," Du Yulin roared. However, Qin Mu's expression was calm, and there was no panic at all. There was even a playful smile on his mouth. Seeing this, Lu Ningxuang's heart tightened, and a feeling of uneasiness quickly filled her heart. A trace of determination flashed in her eyes, and she poured her spiritual power into the long sword without reservation, and then chopped it down fiercely. This sword condensed all her strength. This sword poured out the hard work and essence of her lifelong practice. This sword must kill. Buzz! The cold front trembled, and an amazing white light suddenly burst out from the blade. At this moment, everyone felt that their necks were cut open, and the cold wind blew into their throats. The long sword fell and slashed towards Qin Mu. "At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid." Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 58. Crack. A cracking sound was heard. The dragon-patterned gold belt on Qin Mu's waist seemed unable to withstand the sharp sword energy, and it broke instantly, turning into debris that fell to the ground. Lu Ningxuang's eyes showed ecstasy. "Ha ha ha! Waste is waste." The rumors were indeed true. This Qin Mu was a foolish, incompetent, lustful, and licentious emperor. I guess he must have been scared just now, so he didn't have time to react. A mocking arc appeared at the corner of Lu Ningxuang's mouth. However, the next moment, her eyes trembled suddenly, and her pupils contracted violently. Clang! A sound of metal clashing sounded, and the long sword did not pierce Qin Mu's throat as expected. Instead, broken. When the ice-long sword was about to chop Qin Mu's neck, a hand suddenly reached out from the side. Crack! The long sword broke directly, and the debris flew everywhere. Lu Ningxuang's eyes suddenly widened, looking at the broken sword in her hand in disbelief. How could this happen? She was stunned and stood there, not knowing how to react. "How could my sword break?" Lu Ningxuang muttered to herself. Qin Mu looked at the broken sword, shook his head, and sighed with regret. "The quality of your sword is really too poor. I just broke it with a light pinch." Lu Ningxuang's face turned pale instantly, and the whole person staggered back 2 steps. Despair arose spontaneously and quickly enveloped her whole body. How could this be possible? This frost sword of hers was a sacred treasure forged for her by her father with all the power of the country. How could it be broken by Qin Mu's hand? No. This is not true. Lu Ningxuang lowered her head and looked at the long sword broken into two pieces in her hand, her face full of confusion. Just a little bit. She could kill the tyrant and avenge her father and mother. But why did it turn out like this? Lu Ningxuang's face gradually turned gray, and despair and unwillingness filled her heart. Your Majesty, Du Yulin, who was shouting in anger and tears, howled and suddenly froze. The other civil and military officials, including those foreign girls, were also stunned. What happened just now? Wasn't it a sword dance? How did it suddenly become an assassination? And your Majesty easily broke the frost long sword that looked extremely extraordinary. The ministers were confused. In their impression, Qin Mu has always been a tyrant with average talent, average cultivation, unpredictable personality, bad temper, lustful and greedy and cruel and ruthless. But the scene before them completely overturned their cognition. When did your Majesty become so strong? In the moment when Lu Ningxuang was in a trance, Du Yulin finally arrived, protected Qin Mu behind him, stared at Lu Ningxuang vigilantly, and shouted in a deep voice. Bold assassin! How dare you murder your Majesty? You deserve to die. At the same time, other palace guards and ministers also reacted. They also surrounded Lu Ningxuang, surrounded her, and looked at her covetously. Your Majesty, are you okay? Du Yulin turned his head to look at Qin Mu, his eyes full of anxiety. Qin Mu shook his head. Du Yulin breathed a sigh of relief, then looked at Lu Ningxuang and shouted, Bold assassin! Surrender! He wanted to do it himself, but he didn't dare to leave his Majesty for a moment, for fear that the assassin had accomplices. However, Lu Ningxuang still stood there in a daze, her expression was dull, her face was ashen, and it was obvious that she had not recovered yet. Du Yulin frowned slightly, take her down. The palace guards attacked together, and silver chains flew out, binding Lu Ningxuang tightly. In just a moment, she was pinned down in the hall, unable to move. Lu Ningxuang woke up from her dream. Let me go, she struggled desperately, but the palace guards around her were well prepared and did not give her any chance at all, pinning her to the ground. Du Yulin breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, Qin Mu suddenly patted Du Yulin on the shoulder. Master, if I remember correctly, you brought this assassin to the hall. Qin Mu pointed at Lu Ningxuang who was pinned down on the ground, and said with a smile. Hearing this, Du Yulin froze all over. He was so anxious just now that he even forgot about this for a moment. Wasn't this assassin brought by him? Your Majesty, please forgive me. It was my negligence. Please forgive me. I am loyal to the great Qin and will never do anything to harm your Majesty. I hope your Majesty will understand. Du Yulin knelt down on the ground and apologized in a panic. But Lu Ningxuang suddenly raised her head and looked at Qin Mu, her eyes full of unwillingness. How could you, a foolish emperor, have such a strong power? Until now, she still didn't want to believe that Qin Mu easily blocked her fatal blow. You should know that her strength has already reached the peak of the Purple Mansion realm, and she is only a step away from the Shenzang realm. But now, she can't hurt this foolish emperor at all when she uses the strongest attack. Lu Ningxuang can't accept it at all. Qin Mu curled his lips and smiled softly, why? I didn't die under your sword, you seem very disappointed. Of course I hope you die, Lu Ningxuang gritted her teeth and said viciously. You damn tyrant, I must kill you and avenge my father and mother. Hearing this, Qin Mu narrowed his eyes and the smile on his lips became more intense. He slowly approached Lu Ningxuang, stepped on her chest with his right foot, and looked down at her condescendingly. Your father? It seems that your true identity is quite noble. Feeling the huge force coming from Qin Mu's feet, Lu Ningxuang couldn't help but groan. But she still raised her head stubbornly and stared at Qin Mu. Since you don't want to say it, let me guess. Qin Mu stepped on her with one foot and supported his forehead with one hand to think. Lu Ningxuang clenched her teeth tightly, but the humiliation in her heart became more and more intense, her eyes were red, and she almost cried. From childhood to adulthood, she has been a pearl in the palm of her hand. How could she have suffered such humiliation and torture? Not to mention, this tyrant actually stepped on her with one foot. After a moment, Qin Mu suddenly raised his eyebrows, looked at Lu Ningxuang with interest, leaned down to her ear, and whispered. You are the princess of King Mu Kingdom, Lu Xuanyi's youngest daughter, right? Hearing this, Lu Ningxuang's body shook violently, and her snowy face became even paler. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Bulletin Leng. Chapter 59. I remember that the 9 clans of King Mu country have been slaughtered, not even a dog was spared. How could there be a fish that slipped through the net? And he sneaked in here to assassinate me, what a skill. Qin Mu had a faint smile on his lips, and his deep pupils revealed a frightening cold light. Every word he said was like a sharp knife piercing Lu Ningxuang's heart, and blood was dripping. Shut up, don't insult my King Mu kingdom. Lu Ningxuang clenched her fists and shouted, you damn tyrant. Pa! Qin Mu raised his hand and slapped her, sneering. King Mu kingdom was destroyed because they attempted to rebel, and they deserved it. Your father Lu Xuanyi is a traitor who betrayed the Qin dynasty. How dare you shout here? A clear slap mark quickly appeared on Lu Ningxuang's pale face. Her hair was messy, and she turned her head to the side and shouted. Shut up! You damn tyrant! You are not worthy of being an emperor. My King Mu kingdom just made the most correct choice, we are not betraying. Lu Ningxuang sobbed, her eyes were slightly red, and crystal tears slowly slid down her snow-white face. Qin Mu smiled lightly, ignored her, and looked at Du Yulin. Master, your plan today is very clever. Your Majesty. Du Yulin's face turned pale, he fell to his knees with a plop, kowtowed and begged for mercy. I really don't know who sent this assassin, I am sincere to your Majesty, I have no second thoughts. Qin Mu laughed and hurried over to help Du Yulin up. Master, please stand up, how could I doubt you? I was just joking with you. Seeing this, Du Yulin breathed a sigh of relief. He was also speechless now. Who knew that a girl he met casually would turn out to be the princess of the fallen King Mu kingdom? And he happened to bring her into the palace and assassinated your Majesty. If the other party really succeeded in the assassination, he would have a hard time defending himself. Du Yulin raised his sleeves, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and secretly sighed that it was fortunate that there was no danger. However, His Majesty's cultivation made him feel frightened. The might of the sword just now has already reached the power of the Shenzang realm. With the help of the magic weapon, the power is even closer to the peak of the Shenzang realm. Even if he wants to resist, he has to spend some effort. But His Majesty stopped it with just one palm, and broke the long sword lightly. This is simply unbelievable. The more Du Yulin thought about it, the more horrified he was. He looked at Qin Mu, but saw that Qin Mu always had a faint smile on his face, as if he didn't take the matter just now to heart at all. Du Yulin sighed in his heart, it seems that His Majesty is far more unfathomable than he imagined. Then, His Majesty's previous foolish actions may also have other intentions. At this moment, Du Yulin suddenly felt that His Majesty's figure became extremely majestic. His Majesty's level and realm may have long been beyond the ability of their ministers to guess. No matter what he thought in his heart, he didn't show it on his face, and retreated respectfully to the side. At this time, Qin Mu had already shifted his gaze and looked at Lu Ningxuang again, smiling and asking, "How do you think I should punish you? After all, you almost murdered me." As he spoke, Qin Mu slowly squatted beside Lu Ningxuang. Lu Ningxuang's beautiful eyes widened, staring at Qin Mu angrily, snorting coldly, and said disdainfully, "Kill me if you want to, why so much nonsense?" "He, you really have a hot temper," Qin Mu praised. "In this case, I have no choice but to destroy your dantian and spiritual power first." Hearing this, Lu Ningxuang's delicate body trembled violently, staring at Qin Mu with her beautiful eyes wide open. You are a despicable, shameless, vicious, and cruel tyrant. Even if I turn into a ghost, I will not let you go." Qin Mu pinched her delicate and soft jaw, and his magnetic voice was full of coldness. "Want to die? It's not that easy." As he spoke, a powerful and vast spiritual power burst out from Qin Mu's fingers, drilling into Lu Ningxuang's body and sealing her whole body's spiritual veins. Lu Ningxuang's body suddenly stiffened, and a trace of fear gradually emerged in her angry eyes. Dantian was broken, and her spiritual power was dissipated. This kind of pain is 100 times more painful than being cut into pieces. If she lives like this, she might as well die. Looking at Lu Ningxuang's desperate and unwilling look, Qin Mu smiled playfully. "Why, are you scared?" Qin Mu let go of her hand, stood up, and a hint of teasing flashed in his eyes. "Don't worry, I won't take your life for the time being. I will definitely keep a beauty like you and enjoy it slowly in the future. It would be best if you could have a few more children, so that your Qingmia country will have a successor, right?" Qin Mu's eyes were full of playfulness. Hearing this, Lu Ningxuang clenched her teeth tightly, and her pearly teeth almost bit through her pink lips. Let her give birth to children for her enemy? Then she would rather die now? This is simply the most vicious punishment in the world. Lu Ningxuang stared at Qin Mu with hatred, her arms struggling violently, and she shouted, "You tyrant, just give up on this idea. I would rather die than let you succeed." Qin Mu narrowed his eyes slightly, raised the corners of his lips, and said with a smile, "Do you think what you said counts? You." Lu Ningxuang was furious, with a pair of beautiful eyes full of hatred. However, before she could speak, the ministers spoke first. "Your Majesty, please think twice. This woman is the daughter of a fallen country, and she has a blood feud with the Qin dynasty. She must not be taken into the harem. Yes, Your Majesty, if you want to take her as a concubine, isn't that raising a tiger to harm yourself? Your Majesty, you are wise and will never be deceived by this woman. Your Majesty, please think twice. This evil woman who is a disaster to the country must be eliminated. Lu Ningxuang assassinated Your Majesty and attempted to overthrow the country. She is really a treacherous person. Your Majesty, please order her to be beheaded immediately. To set an example." The ministers in the court were excited and tried to persuade Qin Mu to stop them. They really couldn't understand why His Majesty wanted to keep this woman alive. You have to know that this girl is the princess of a fallen country, carrying a blood feud with the Qin dynasty, and just now she had attempted an assassination. His Majesty did not pursue the responsibility, but continued to take her as a concubine, and even wanted to give birth to offspring. Isn't this raising a tiger to cause trouble, leaving hidden dangers for the Qin dynasty? This is simply another foolish act. Lu Ningxuang looked at all this coldly, but couldn't help but feel a surge of sadness in her heart. She was the princess of Qingmia Kingdom, but now she has ended up with a broken country and a family, and is despised by heaven and abandoned by people. And all this is all thanks to Qin Mu, the first foolish monarch in the history. Lu Ningxuang closed her eyes, her eyelashes trembled, and 2 lines of clear tears flowed down her cheeks, dripping on the floor, and blooming into beautiful little flowers. When Qin Mu heard the advice of the ministers, his eyes lit up slightly. Originally, he just teased Lu Ningxuang to let her experience the feeling of fear and despair. But he didn't expect the reaction of the ministers to be so great. That's great. Qin Mu immediately decided, from now on, Lu Ningxuang will be named Xuanfei. The ceremony will be simple. She will enter the palace immediately. Civil and military officials. They have discovered that His Majesty will do whatever they advise. Stupid monarch. Stupid monarch. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 60. Ding. It is detected that the host does not listen to the advice of the ministers, insists on his own way, and gets the reward of stupidity. Zhou Tianxing de Great Array. Zhou Tianxing de Great Array, the ancient heavenly court's protective formation. Anyone who is covered by the formation, no matter what kind of magical power he has, cannot escape the fall of the starlight. This formation is integrated with the external space, and can summon the Zhoutian universe star power and the power of billions of stars. The power is strong enough to destroy the world and subvert everything. Qin Mu was refreshed. As expected, he got the reward of stupidity. And it is also extremely extraordinary. As long as this Zhou Tianxing de Great Array is arranged in Chang'an City, he can sit on the Diao Tai and rest assured from then on. Thinking of this, Qin Mu felt very comfortable. The ministers looked at Qin Mu and didn't care, and even looked a little eager to try, and they were helpless. It was like this every time. The more they advised, the more His Majesty went against them. He didn't consider their opinions at all, and he would even make it worse. He was afraid that others didn't know that he was a tyrant. The ministers looked at each other, their faces speechless. His Majesty is still the same as before, without any change. No matter how his strength changes, his lustful nature cannot be changed. In the eyes of these ministers, His Majesty didn't care about Lu Ningxuang's assassination, and spared her life, and even wanted to take her as a concubine because of his lust for beauty. This is simply ridiculous. Lu Ningxuang's hatred for Dakin has been fully expressed in the court just now. If Lu Ningxuang is really allowed to enter the palace, the consequences will be disastrous. His Majesty, this lustful and tyrant. The ministers complained in their hearts. Although they didn't dare to say anything, they had already complained about Qin Mu in their hearts. Lu Ningxuang had no scruples at all. She had already been caught. She threw the jar and cursed. Qin Mu. You bastard. Beast. Beast. You idiot, you will die. You are a stupid pig. You are just a stupid pig without brains. Kill me if you can, otherwise one day, I, Lu Ningxuang, will kill you with my own hands. Curses came out from the corners of Lu Ningxuang's pink lips. Her face was pale, her eyes were red and swollen, and her tears were not dry. She stared at Qin Mu with hatred, as if she wanted to tear Qin Mu to pieces. But she obviously didn't know how to curse, and her vocabulary was obviously insufficient. Over and over, she was nothing more than idiot, beast, stupid pig, bastard, and so on. For Qin Mu, who had been influenced by the Internet water army in the 21st century, these words had no offensive power at all. Any elementary school student wearing a red scarf on the street can curse more dirty than her. Those words don't sound like cursing, but more like the little romance between lovers. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows slightly, smiling. He stretched out his hand, lifted Lu Ningxuang's pointed chin, looked at her quietly with his dark and deep eyes, and said in a gentle and doting tone. Be good, don't worry. After I completely conquer your body and occupy your soul, I will definitely take you back to King Mu country to see what your motherland looks like after the country was destroyed. Qin Mu, you are a bastard. Hearing this, Lu Ningxuang was so angry that she trembled all over, glaring at Qin Mu with gritted teeth. Qin Mu was not shaken at all, just squinting his eyes and quietly looking at Lu Ningxuang. After a moment, Qin Mu said calmly, "Come here, send concubine Zhuang to bathe and burn incense, change into new clothes, and prepare to enter the palace." As soon as the voice fell, 2 palace maids came forward, dragged Lu Ningxuang, and took her to the side hall. "Let me go. Don't touch me." Lu Ningxuang screamed hysterically, like a crazy wild cat. However, she was clamped by the 2 palace maids and could not break free. Soon, Lu Ningxuang's figure disappeared in the hall. Watching Lu Ningxuang leave, all the ministers lowered their heads silently, silent. They suddenly felt a little sympathy for Lu Ningxuang. His Majesty's move was too cruel, which made those who were used to the cruelty of the court a little frightened. In their hearts, they were more determined to never do anything to betray the Qin dynasty. "Dismiss the court." As Qin Mu's lazy and evil voice fell, the court fell into silence in an instant. Then, Qin Mu slowly stood up and turned to walk out of the imperial steps. The foreign girls followed Qin Mu and served him obediently. "Farewell, Your Majesty." The ministers knelt down and shouted loudly, with an extremely respectful attitude. It was not until Qin Mu walked away that the ministers raised their heads one after another, with complicated expressions. "Alas, it seems that Your Majesty will not come to court during this period." A civil servant sighed. "Yes, there are already many concubines in the palace, and now we have contributed so many foreign girls. Your Majesty will not come to court for a while. Your Majesty's strength is beyond our ability to see through, but his lustful nature has not changed. I just hope that Your Majesty will not be too obsessed with beauty and can focus more on the court, so that we can rest assured." Another general also looked sad and said with a worried look, "The northern border Zhang Luoshan is still recruiting strong men and expanding the army. He may attack at any time. Are we really going to just leave it alone? What can we do? Your Majesty hasn't spoken yet, so we dare not mobilize troops privately. This matter is also thanks to Minister Wang. He contributed 5,000 concubines at once. What a great move. Who said it wasn't? Your Majesty will have fun now. Minister Wang's ability to guess the Emperor's intentions is really beyond our reach." Ah! Several ministers became sarcastic and looked at Wang Xing with contempt. "Humph," Wang Xing snorted coldly, "this is Your Majesty's decision. What does it have to do with me?" He was as thick-skinned as a city wall. How could he admit that he was wrong? Several ministers looked at each other and sneered. "Heh." A slightly older minister suddenly spoke up. He looked gloomy and spoke with sarcasm. "What Minister Wang said is very true, but we should not indulge His Majesty in enjoying beauty too much, otherwise the great Qin will sooner or later be destroyed by some ministers who only know how to curry favor with the powerful." As soon as these words came out, they immediately attracted the echoes of several other ministers. They all offered only 1 or 2, but Wang Xing offered 5,000 in one breath, and was praised and rewarded by His Majesty. This behavior has destroyed a certain delicate balance, which will naturally cause dissatisfaction among other ministers. Minister Wang's face was livid, staring at these ministers coldly, and he wanted to rush forward and sew their mouths shut. But he was an important official of the court after all, and he knew how to be patient. Minister Wang took a deep breath, suppressed the boiling anger in his chest, and said with a fake smile, "You are joking. How could the great Qin be destroyed with His Majesty here? Don't you believe in His Majesty?" In just 2 sentences, he put a bigger hat on the ministers who had just spoken, and the faces of those ministers who had just spoken suddenly changed. Wang Shangshu's words were heartbreaking. If they were to be spread out, they would be in trouble. Ha ha ha. Wang Shangshu is serious. I just reminded you casually. Since Wang Shangshu has said so, I will not say anything more. The ministers immediately put away the sarcastic look on their faces and hurriedly said with a smile, Wang Xing's face was slightly relieved, and he turned around and left. The ministers looked at Wang Xing's back and couldn't help cursing in their hearts, "Old fox." Then the ministers dispersed and left the Jinluan palace. At this time, Lu Ningxuang had been taken to the side hall and was being undressed by the palace maid.